here, and that's what matters. And that's to be expected. You know, summertime, we have more daylight to get things done, and got to get the crops in the ground, and got to get all the critters fed. I mean, there's a lot for y'all to do out there, and you got to take advantage of daylight. I'd just be glad to get all my garden planted. It will stay warm and dry together. We could get everything done. My beans came up. I was afraid they were going to rot in the ground, but they came up. So, okay. So, how's everybody doing? Good? Yeah, it's good to see you. Had a great day of worship as we enter a kind of a new season for our congregation from a worship perspective, and I was so proud the way the Lord showed up with us, and so I look forward to see what the Lord's going to do. I think it's not going to look like what we're used to in the end, but that's not a negative thing. It's just going to look different. And I feel so blessed. You know, we have so much developed talent in our church, from running the electronics to singing to playing the keyboard. Rita even got down there and showed off on Sunday. I was thoroughly impressed. What is encouraging is that we didn't really skip that much of a beat. We just kept on going in a different way, but different is good. And so I just look forward to see what's going to happen through all of this, and it's encouraging. I like encouragement. Encouragement is good, right? So it's good. Wait a minute. I never even signed your vacation for the last Sunday. I don't remember her submitting any requests to be off. Wait a minute. Wait a minute now. Yeah, she needs a break, and I'm glad you're able to be with family, and even how your talent is going to play into this. I look forward to seeing that, and I appreciate you being a part of the team. All right. Anybody have some good news from your neck of the woods you'd like to share? Happy birthday tomorrow. Yep, congratulations. Yeah. You're going to be 13. I thought it was 12, but it's 13. That's all right. Put it off as long as you can. All right. Yeah, well, behave being staying home and healing. That's not going to happen. So, what about, now don't start off a prayer list. Just give me good news. But that's a praise. That's good news. Encouragement. Anything? Yes, sir. Awesome. Okay. Great. Great. Anybody else? All right. Well, what's that? Well, I don't know. I don't know about that, but we'll have some fun trying. I told Rita earlier I was struggling to find anything I thought was funny enough, deserving of you. But so if you don't like it, I'll try better next time. Okay, a fellow Mennonite pastor, they were and another pastor were in a car in a funeral procession. You know, speaking of funeral procession, okay, I remember my first funeral, and I was scared to death. No pun intended. Officiating, yes, at that little church in Kentucky. It was a member's husband who had not really attended much, and you want to do a good job. These are these big moments at times. And so I have in my idea what this is supposed to look like, and you're supposed to be serious and somber and reflective. And I rode to the funeral, to the cemetery in the hearse. So it was the guy that works for the funeral home, the guy that owns the funeral home, and I'm in the middle. And who, you know, lo and behold, this would end up being some wonderful friendships I would build for the 4 years I was there. I ended up working at the funeral home. And they cut up the whole way to the cemetery. I mean, just cut up. And I'm thinking, this is so disrespectful. What are they doing? I'm trying to be reverential, and they're sitting here just joking and laughing, and I'm thinking, these guys are crazy. But I come to realize that, doing what they do, if you take it too seriously, it can really get to you. And I thought of that when I thought of these stories. I just happened to fall in on a few of those kinds of stories. But so two pastors was in the last car in the funeral procession. These are true stories. Driving to a cemetery where they had never been before to conduct the service. It was pouring rain, and suddenly, he says, my car blew a tire. Well, we couldn't stop the processional, which went on ahead, and we couldn't change the tire because my jack didn't work. A farmer came out. He couldn't help us. Finally, we turned around, drove to a gas station with the funeral flag on the car and a flat tire on the front. My fellow pastor, wearing the Mennonite garb, collar, jumped out of the station and hollered, we're two preachers on the way to the cemetery, and we've lost the body. And they changed that tire like we were at the Indianapolis 500, sent us on our way, and didn't charge us a thing. And true story. Anyway, two preacher friends once called upon at the last minute to do a last-minute funeral by the funeral director to conduct the funeral as a team. Unknown to either was the fact that neither was familiar with the family. Arriving from out of town at the funeral home, they received instructions from the funeral director, and then the two preachers side by side led the coffin in a procession down the church aisle toward the pulpit area. Quietly, before reaching the front, one turned to the other and asked, who is it? I have no idea. I was hoping you'd know. That's it. That's all the story. That's it. What do you do in that situation? How do you handle that? That's me, isn't it? That's me telling Rita, I need a first and last name. Oh, me. A newly appointed young clergyman was contacted by a local funeral director to hold a graveside service at a small country cemetery in Iowa. There was to be no funeral, just a committal, because the deceased had no family or friends left in Iowa. The young pastor started early to the cemetery, but soon lost his way. After making several wrong turns, he finally arrived a half hour late. The hearse was nowhere in sight, and the workmen were relaxing under a nearby tree, eating their lunch. The pastor went to the open grave, found that the vaulted lid was already in place. He took out his book and read the service. And as he returned to his car, he overheard one of the workmen say, do you think we should tell him it's a septic tank? Well, that's all you get tonight. So, All right, let's take a look at the announcements. I know there's been some confusion about the meal, but the meal is next Wednesday. So keep that in mind. If you brought anything tonight, like strawberry cake or something, you can still leave that in the office area. If it's Brussels sprouts, you can take it home. So it's fine. But just keep in mind next week. Finance committee meeting is this week. Need to have all the deacons there and the people in the bulletin there. Got the fish fry this Monday. Bus leaves at 9:30. All right. Vacation Bible School date, so keep that in mind. It's coming along. Collection there also continues for Samaritan's Purse. And then, just in case, if it's more convenient for you to give online, you can use the link there. And don't forget about the church directory availability. Are you able to see how many people looked on the directory? Okay. Logged in. Okay. Are we getting some action? Are people?
The last time I checked, it was like around 20.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just on the app. I don't know if that shows. I think that's like with the actual logins. That's just
Yeah.
the app. That doesn't
Yeah.
count who goes to the website.
I get the sense that church directories are not as big of a thing anymore. So, but if you'd like to participate and sign up for it, so you can see where all your people are and get their names and things like that, you can do that. Yes. Does it have anniversaries? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any announcements that we didn't discuss? Yeah, then they just sent out a text too. So, anything else? Anything else in general? No? All right. Well, we jumped into Psalm 23 last week. Today, we're looking at verse 1. Now, when you look at this, I'm not trying to overwhelm you with the study. It's more material than we can ever hope to go through. So some of this is just fodder for you to chew on if you so choose. Tonight you're going to notice there's some of the Hebrew words, and that's not, again, to just, I'm not trying to church it up. It does have some relevance because the first verse, that word, Lord, the word used for God there is pretty important. And most people don't know that when you read the word Lord, it doesn't always mean the same word as maybe the last time you read the same letters, Lord. And so I just wanted to explain why you'll see the words will appear differently. So it says in the ESV, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And then in the message there, the message translation, it says in capital letters, the Lord is my shepherd. I don't need a thing. So you'll notice the capitalized L-O-R-D. This is a letter of David. And I threw in one of his own personal descriptions of 1 Samuel 17, and I'll read that. It's a few pages over. I've listed the New Living, the Message, and the English ESV. 1 Samuel 17, 34 through 36. But this is David talking about his experience as a shepherd. So from his own mouth, David said to Saul, Your Majesty, I've kept sheep from my father. Every now and then, when a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, listen to him, describe what he does. I would chase after the animal. I'd strike it. I'd rescue the sheep from its mouth. And if it turned on me, I'd grab it by its hair, strike it, and kill it. This is an important job. He took it seriously. Your Majesty, I've killed both lions and bears. And he says, I'm going to do the same to this uncircumcised Philistine who defies the armies of the living God. So here's David describing his shepherding resume, and it's pretty impressive. He took his job serious. You know, I've often noticed that the people you work with, you'll know how valuable their job is to them by what they're willing to risk to keep it and to do it well. And this was very important to David. So the psalm reflects David as a place of trust there in that literary description. Is a place of, what do you do in a place of danger? How do you interact with God? Now, there in number 2, let's talk about that divine name, because that's pretty important. Now, again, I don't mean to get us all lost in all of this English and Hebrew and the letters back and forth, but I thought it was interesting enough for us to make a stab at it. So whenever you read the word Lord in all caps, you're reading the personal name of God, Yahweh. And you see those little words there. You see those little Hebrew words, YHWH. You actually, if you look at that little Hebrew word on the first line, you read it from right to left, that's Yahweh. That's the Hebrew word, literally, but you'll see it. That's the word Yahweh. That's God's personal name. When he introduces himself, he calls himself, he uses this word. Now, there's another word to describe it, and even when I was typing it out, I knew I was going to probably not pronounce it correctly, tetragrammaton, which is the combination of 2 other Greek words, which means 4 letters. So, from Yahweh, it comes from the original Hayah, which means to be or exist. You remember when God said he's hovering over the world, and then he brings things into creation. Before there was creation, there was God. He's always been. He has existed before we had a word to describe existence. He's just always been there. And that's the idea behind this word. He says, I have always been reliably present before everything else. And you know, we describe or define our world, we qualitate our world based on the experiences of our senses. Well, that doesn't even exist. God existed before there was the capability to describe his existence. Now we get kind of philosophical, but I hope that raises your estimation of your God. That's a pretty big, you can't describe it. That's your God. Before there was, he is. So there's the theological, and then the other import is that this idea is that it is God describing, by using that particular name, his active, binding commitment to us. Now, look down. There's a couple of breakout sections. Breakout section, knowledge number 1 and number 2. I tried to highlight the areas that are important. So breakout number 1, understanding the word Yahweh. Those 4 letters, Yod, He, Yah, and He, are the make up the name of God. And again, the root meaning is I am, or I cause to be. The theological significance there in number 3 in the middle of breakout number 1 is that unlike a creature whose being depends on something else, God is the one who is and of himself. All right, if we go much further, I know we're all going to get lost in all of that. The Jewish usage, and this is the interesting part, is that the Jewish usage and reference there in number 4 is that it's unpronounced. Jewish people, especially scribes, let's say you're reading along and that word Yahweh comes in. So the Lord is my shepherd. So there it is, Yahweh. They don't pronounce it. They say, nope, we can't say that word is way too important. The name of God, you can't pronounce the name of God. So they would they would call it Adonai. Now, you've probably heard Adonai. Some of you maybe remember Amy Grant's song, Adonai. It's another word for God, but it's a lower word. It's a general word for Lord. It can be used, say, for King Saul, or it can be used, say, for God. So it's not as big of a word. But they got to get around, you can't be reading Scripture and you skipping every time you see God's name. And so they said, we got to come up with a way to pronounce God's name without pronouncing God's name. So they take the 4 consonants. Now, Hebrew is an interesting thing. It didn't have vowel structures. There was no vowels in the Hebrew language. This makes it kind of hard to learn how to pronounce, doesn't it? That's why they call it an oral language. You memorize the vowels. So you just knew when you're reading along with Yahweh that there's an A and an E in there. You just learned it from a kid and you never forgot it. Well, over time, that became a little hard. People just forget. So they started adding vowels into the words so people remember how to pronounce them. So they took the vowels from Adonai. Let me see. You see those little tittles underneath those words in the first sentence of number 2 on the basic knowledge? Those 2 little half crosses underneath, those are vowels. And so they would take the vowels from Adonai and add it to the consonants of Yahweh, and they get the word Jehovah. That's where Jehovah comes from. So listen, look. Jehovah is not a real word. I hate it for the Jehovah's Witness. They based everything around that word, but it's not even in the Bible. It's an aberration. It doesn't exist. It's not a real word. So, but that's what they would do. So they're sitting there reading the word Yahweh, and they say Jehovah. So that's how they got out of pronouncing, because it's such a unique word. When you heard the word Jehovah, you knew you were saying the word Yahweh. You knew what important word that was. So, FYI. All right, let me see. I don't think we'll go any deeper. I can already tell we're breaking away. Let's take a look at the practical theological applications, okay, of Psalm chapter of 23, verse 1. So back on this page, the front page, the theological, this is the good stuff that matters, okay? 1, this is talking about spiritual rest and the rhythm of worship. Trusting rest in worship and silence, it confidently God sustains us. Hebrews 1:3, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. That's the rhythm. You're supposed to have it all. Yeah. Everybody got it now? I forgot to put page numbers. All right. So if you were to have a page number, that would be number 2. The back page, the front page. All right. That's Rita's fault. So, all right. Why do we worship? One of the things that I have come to appreciate in the chaplain corps is being exposed to a variety of ways of people doing worship. And I began to pick up on that as a Baptist, as a free church, we don't put enough preeminence on the act of worship. We treat it way too casually. As if I got nothing better to do, I'll go to worship. And that's entirely out of character for what God expects. It is to have a preeminent place in our life. How can we say as the people of God that God is important if we don't prioritize when he says worship him? And we need to do better. The church is a catalyst of change. Listen, you can support all the other ministries out there that you want, but whether it's David Jeremiah or Charles Stanley, they are not God's ordained structure for impacting the world, it is still just the church, and it centers and pivots around worship. As a church's worship goes, the life of that church and its impact goes. So one of the things I always try to make sure we make important with everyone involved in our worship is that we make sure it's important. That what we're going to do this Sunday has nothing to do with what we did last Sunday. It stands on its own. Number 2, generosity as a response. He says, I lack nothing. And that it means he freely gives to us, whether it's our time, whether it's talent, whether it's treasure. 2 Corinthians says, remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop. But the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure. For God loves a person who gives cheerfully, and God will generously provide all you need, and then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. I lack nothing because God gives me what I need. Now, while he does mention money here, and money does play a central role in worship, because it plays such a central role in our lives, if we don't be intentional on how we manage our money in worship, our money begins to manage us. But this is much more than just money. It's a heart of giving. And as we give, God returns in giving. God takes care of us. It may not look like the world defines the way you think it should, but God takes care of us. Then number 3, you see this shepherd-style leadership. Pastors, small group leaders, deacons should emulate a good shepherd's gentleness and sacrificial care. 1 Peter, care for the flock that God has entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly. What does that word mean? How do you watch over a flock grudgingly? Oh my God, I had to go there again. I had to go to church on Sunday again for those people. That's grudgingly. I got to tell you, I've had a few cows that I've grudged, that I couldn't get to the sale barn fast enough, but never a church member. No, really. So, not for what you get out of it, but because you are eager to serve God. Emotional and mental resilience. You know, most of our anxieties are often spring from a sense of scarcity. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if I don't have this? What if I don't get that? And so Psalm 23:1 addresses that at its root, addresses this idea. Sometimes it's best just to slow down and to thank God for being the shepherd that he is in your life. To kind of reset your idea of what it means. How do you relate to the things you don't have? And how does not having those things negatively impact your relationship with God? Do you need those things? How many things do we need? How many things are too much? How much is enough? Do you ever try to answer those questions? And I mean, geez, there seems to be a facial cream and a pill to no end, as if there's things being created from scratch on planet Earth. Those things have always been around. They'll be repackaged and be around again. Where does your sense of security lie? And then discerning God's voice, daily practices with the Scripture, prayer, silence with God. It trains those, when you practice these things, it trains us to recognize and follow Christ leading, to hear his voice. John 10 says, when When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because why? Why do the sheep follow? They recognize his voice. They won't follow a stranger. I think we lose a lot of church folks right there in that little passage. They go off with strangers because they don't know the difference between friend and foe, because they don't spend enough time to listen to God's voice. And then they wonder why they get off into the hinterlands. How did I ever get here? And they treat it as if it was God's fault. God was calling you the whole time. You just didn't recognize the voice. And that's sad, because he freely wants you to talk with him. And then mature care in a community, mutual care. Bear each other's burdens. Galatians, Paul says, share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. I shall not want, in part because the community in which I have my faith expressed, i.e. our church, helps to meet my needs. Now, we can't meet your needs if you're not in the faith, in the community. We live within a pasture. Not a pastor, but a pasture. There are expectations on us as members and how we behave. And when you leave outside the fence, you increasingly remove the capacity for the faith community to care for you. And I think that should have repercussions of why it's so important. Again, be in worship. Be excited about the opportunity. Now, I'm not dictatorial that if you're not here, you're a sinner. If you're missing, but that's between you and the Lord to know what those balances are. But let me encourage you: prioritize. In fact, for those of you that may be raised in a liturgical setting, there's a few of you you're used to hearing worship as Eucharistic. I suggest we should consider our worship Eucharistic. It is the giving of grace from God when we participate in it. By being here, God is Eucharistically ministering his presence to us in a way that cannot be replicated any other manner. Period. All right.